Hi everyone, it's Lisa here. I'm back today with a video for you, and today I'm going to be playing with some Brusho and doing some simple Copic colouring, and I'm going to create a couple of cards for you. So I thought I would run through the supplies that I'm using in the video today. This is the Altenew Wonderland stamp set. It came out a few months ago. I fell in love with it and I decided that I would go ahead and purchase it, and I have bought the coordinating dies as well. So I'm going to be using those as the main focal point in my card today. And I'm going to be showing you a couple of ways to die cut those stamps that have really long stems, which I hope you'll find useful. This is the Happy die from the Script Words 2 die set from Altenew, and I'm going to be using just that birthday from Altenew Tulip. I've also got two top folding A2 note cards there, a couple of panels of Tim Holtz Distress Watercolour cardstock, some Neenah 110 cardstock, that's going to be for the die cutting, some black cardstock and a small panel of white, that will be for the sentiment, the leaf green Brusho and also some Copic markers, and I'll put the numbers of those up on the screen as I use them. I'm going to show you a couple of ways of applying the Brusho to your watercolour cardstock. I've put mine on a piece of paper in a box, so it is quite a messy product. It can fly around, so if you do it in a box it does help to contain that mess. So I'm just opening the pot up here. When you actually buy the Brusho, it comes in pots which I think have a sprinkle option. I was very kindly given some Brusho by a friend of mine, and she sent me some which I've decanted into little plastic pots, but it means I don't have that sprinkle option. So what I do is I just take some out with a paintbrush and I just dab it or flick it onto that watercolour cardstock, and now I'm just going to spray it with my distress sprayer, and as you can see the pigment is really vibrant and it just spreads beautifully if you let the water do its own thing. The second option is to actually put your water down first onto your cardstock. So I spray some water on, and I didn't put enough on. I should have sprayed a couple more times so that when I flicked the pigment on from the pot it would have spread straight away. It really doesn't matter because you can just carry on adding, and then you can take the sprayer and you can just spray some more water onto it. And you can see how vibrant it is. It's really, really beautiful in real life. And I sprayed again a little bit more water on there. Then I thought I probably had too much, so I dabbed a little bit off. In hindsight, I wish I would have left it because I think it took out some of the grain, and it just didn't give quite the same effect as the first panel, but I went with it anyway. I'm going to move on now to show you the stamping and colouring, but first of all I'm going to show you the first way to align your die with your stamped image. It can be really fiddly with those long stems because they move around. So I took the die, put it on my panel, and then I slotted the stamp into it. It sits in really nicely. You can feel that you've put it in the right place, and so I then flicked the top of the MISTI over and just removed the die before I stamped that down onto the surface. And because I'm doing two and I know that it's aligned up properly, I was able to just go ahead and stamp the second one. The second option is really easy too. You pop your die onto your panel of cardstock, run it through the die cutting machine, and then what you do at this point is you just take your stamp and you slot it into that window. You can feel it when it slots in, a bit like you can with the die. And then I picked it up with the MISTI lid, put my positive back in, and then I just stamped down onto that. And that way you get a really good even white line around the edge of the die cut. It's a great way of lining it up, and that one works particularly well for solid dies. So next I'm going to colour my two main images, and I won't show both of them in full because it's really basic colouring. I'm not doing any blending at all. I think this stamp set lends itself really well to all types of mediums. Actually, it looks fantastic with watercolour, it looks really good with Copics, it looks good with pencils. I think its sort of graphic style lends itself to so many different things, and I wanted something bold today, so I took 3 colours and I did 3 colours of pink and 3 colours of blue, and I just went ahead and I just coloured in those areas of the stamp. And as you can see, no blending going on. I'm just randomly colouring sections and trying to sort of make sure it's a fairly even balance of colour across the image. I think there's something really satisfying about just colouring blocks in an image. It's a bit like when you colour triangles or you colouring in your hex chart or something. You're not thinking about light source, you're not worrying about whether colours are blending properly, whether the mix of colours is right and all that sort of thing. You're literally just enjoying colouring sections of an image, and I think that, you know, you can still have a lot of fun doing that. So I took my colourless blender and just took away some of the pink that had strayed into the area where I'm now going to add the green. And I did use 2 greens here. It's a tiny area and you really didn't need that, but I thought I'd add in a slightly darker bit just to give that a bit of variety. And I do a similar thing with the blues too. So I take 3 blues, everything's listed on the screen for you, and I coloured the image in the same way. And I also coloured that smaller image on the left as well. Same process, but you don't need to see all of that. So here are the 2 final or 3 final images. I'm now going to go ahead and die cut those. And you can see how well those have actually lined up with the die when I put the die down. So I just put some low tack tape on it and I ran that through my die cutting machine, and then I did the same thing with the blue. So once I've done those, I've got all my images ready now to just put onto my panel. As you can see here, it just lines up exactly the same way. Because I use the MISTI, I don't have any problems lining that die up and then just sending that through the big shot again. You can see here that you get a really even solid white line around the edge of the die cut, so it's a great technique to use. I'm going to go ahead now and just pull together the other elements of the card, and I'm just going to lay this die down now onto some black cardstock, and I run this through the big shot twice, and I do actually adhere these both together. I haven't showed you that part of the process, as you don't need to see that. I just use some wet adhesive. And then I'm going to take the birthday sentiment from Altenew Tulip, and I'm just going to stamp that down onto some white cardstock. I use VersaFine ONYX black ink, and I actually fussy cut it. There isn't a die for it, but I thought it would look quite nice cut out as if there was a die. Now my Brusho panels have dried, and I have trimmed them and adhered them to the 2 top folding note cards. So I'm now just playing around with my images and the placement just to see how I want it to look. And for the pink floral card, I'm going to use a sentiment from the Wonderland stamp set, and I'm just going to stamp that directly onto the panel. And because it's a textured cardstock, I mean, it doesn't have a huge amount of texture, but there is some. I'm going to use the MISTI. I want to make sure that I can double stamp it and get a really good clear impression, and I'm having trouble with my stamp here. My hands get hot and I find it really awkward sometimes to get those stamps to stay down on the panel. So adding the VersaFine on now, and I dropped the ink pad as well, as you can see. I thought I would leave that in. You can see what happens as soon as you start filming, you start dropping everything. But anyway, I've added the ink onto the stamp, and I'm just going to double stamp that twice. And I really do think you need to have a double stamp because it just really gives it a much bolder sentiment if you do it that way. So I thought I would adhere this rather than pop it up. I'm just going to put this flat down onto the cardstock. So I'm using some Studio Katia glue, and I'm just going to arrange that so that it bends over the top there. There is a little bit hanging off the bottom, but I do trim that off a little bit later, and I put some blocks down just to make sure it's dried properly. For the blue card, I've got the two images here for this card, and I do the exact same thing. I just adhere these with wet adhesive. Again, I don't always want my images popped up, and I did think I could have popped the second one up maybe, but then I would have had to have popped the die cut up, and it would have been really fiddly to put foam tape behind that. So in the end, I just went ahead and I laid everything down flat, and then I added some, as I mentioned earlier, I did actually glue these two together earlier, and I've just popped on some glue onto the back, and I'm just laying that down now. Now I'm just going to add the final sentiment on. I put some foam tape onto the back of the birthday sentiment. As I mentioned earlier, I did cut that out as if it was die cut, and I've just popped it on there. I'm trimming off the little bits that hang over the bottom of the card, and that finishes the two cards for today. I hope that you enjoyed seeing the Brusho in action, and also managed to pick up a few tips about die cutting those fiddly stems along the way. All supplies that I've used in the video are going to be listed in the description below and over at my blog in case you're interested in seeing what I've used in more detail. But thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate you spending time with me, and I will be back soon with another project for you.